Hey, this is Trey Kay, host of West Virginia Public Broadcasting's podcast, Us and Them. 2 days after the 2024 presidential election, we brought together the Us and Them dinner party. Now, since the run-up of the 2020 election, we've gathered together 8 West Virginians, 4 conservative and 4 liberal, diverse in age, gender, and race, to gather together for a meal and talk about the issues that divide us. This year's gathering was our most honest and emotionally charged to date. Tensions ran high at the table, mirroring the atmosphere in households across the country. The emotions were still raw from the election, and we asked our guests to speak their minds. It sounds to me that when we're talking about like what happened on January 6th in context of the election, it sounds to me from your comment, Boomy, and your comment, Elliot, that in many ways there's concern that this thing happened and any type of prosecution of it has been scuttled, and now he's won an election. And it seems, I don't want to put words in people's mouth, but it seems like that people are concerned that basically that he hasn't really seen justice with regard to this. First of all, am I stating that correctly?
Sure.
And Lexi, you were wanting to get in earlier,
Yeah, I kind of interpreted it a little bit differently, in my opinion. Like when I look at the transfer of power and how everything went, regardless of whether or not you think that Trump led the insurrection, whatever. I mean, the party as a whole, the way that they looked at it, the way it went on, kind of like so the beliefs that you have now. I think that that's a fear that we all had, regardless of how this election turns out. I think a lot of us are afraid of what's coming. I think a lot of us were afraid of the inverse, like if Kamala won, if this was a repeat. But I think just looking at my party, like the party that I'm affiliating with, nobody has this concern. And I think that it's important to talk about why you feel that way. Like, why are you not worried? Why is this not something that we're thinking about? Because I mean, it just happened, right? Like that, and that shook all of us, but nobody's saying that. And I also think it's really important to acknowledge that, I mean, we took a beating, guys. Like, we did. And still nobody's saying that this isn't real, that this didn't happen. Like, we're devastated. I'm devastated.
When you say it's not real, are you suggesting that you believe that the election was fair?
I do.
That you're confident?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that is what I'm saying. And I think that most people in my party are. And I think that also says a lot in and of itself.
Well, Jay and Michael, you all had said the last time that you couldn't point to anything that was unfair or irregular, but you said there were irregularities. And you said that a few times, that there were irregularities. Were there irregularities this time?
I mean, I've seen a couple. Voting machines breaking down in different counties. That happens every election. Maybe it'll be enough to sway an election. Maybe it won't. We won't know for several weeks about that. So, I mean, I feel it's too...
But not a national election, of course,
to
right?
The buses of
Well, but I mean, do you think that this was that this election was fair?
Do I believe it was fair?
Yeah.
I believe it's too early to say whether or not it's fair until all the votes been counted.
Well, but I mean, is there anything that's going to happen that's going to change it? You know, do you see anything that could happen?
Should we hold off from considering that Donald Trump is the victor until we get to the bottom of any irregularities?
I mean, he's won by such a large margin this time around that I don't...
So it was fair.
It was fair.
Jay, what do you think? Do you think this one was fair?
Me? I think it was most definitely fairer than probably 2020. Now, by the same token, I've never said he won 2020.
Never said who won. Never said the Trump won.
I never said that.
Yeah,
what I said was there was problems with 2020.
And what other election have you seen problems with in your lifetime? you and I have more elections under our belts than most of the folks, than anybody around the table.
Well,
so
I know that
what other elections?
I know the Kennedy-Nixon race was very problematic with Chicago and so forth back in 1960. There was some problems with Bush Gore in 2000, and how that broke out with the hanging chads and so forth. Who knows? Who knows? Honestly,
They let the states. They usually let the states choose how they count their ballots, but in this case, the court swept in and didn't let them finish and didn't let them go ahead and count the way they had determined to count them at the time.
2020, due to COVID and due what was going on, there was a lot of changes that was different, and there was a lot of potential problems. And I think,
But since that time,
there were definitely problems with the election. Now, you've never heard me say Trump won that election. What I've said is there was problems.
But you supported a man who has for 4 years said nothing but that he had won the election.
Yeah.
And he kept saying that.
Yeah.
You know, the lesson
Yeah,
for
he sure
the
did.
lesson for this election to me is that you can get people to believe anything if you say it enough.
Well,
because I mean, he just right, and just kept saying it. I mean, his genius is in his persistence in his lies. It's just that he does it enough. Where 64 courts have already said no, that didn't happen, but he does it enough that he's able to influence the people who don't read for themselves, who don't know, and we end up with January 6th. We end up with so many other things that have happened to people. And the coarse discourse that we have now that's become so unacceptable.
That we're even at the point that we're still talking about it. Like, that's also crazy. Like, why are we still arguing about whether or not this man won the election? Like, that's still crazy. Like, why is that still a conversation that we need to have?
Hey, thanks for listening to this. We who've been working on the Us and Them project for the past decade believe that division and polarization in America is the issue of our times. We're here to wrap our arms and our minds around this challenge. In a splintered world, we believe that listening is one of the last bridges we have towards understanding.